going on, everybody? It's Rod with Power Group. Welcome back on The Pursuit of Wealth, your home for MJ stocks, crypto assets, news, and interviews. Today's Wednesday, April 2nd. Hope you're doing well. And in this video, this is going to be my last video ever comparing the dot-com days, the big tech boom compared to the MJ sector. And we know that Amazon dropped 95% back in 2001 after this big boom, and that's because of the volatility and the fact that it was only just getting started into its growth curve, right? It didn't hit mass adoption. You get into the early adopter phase. So we're going to compare the growth curve. We're not going to compare Amazon and a different MJ company. We're not comparing products and services. We're not comparing the sector. We're comparing how the stocks performed and behaved in the early days when they were just getting started. So their growth, where they were versus where they're going. And then we're going to compare that to the MJ industry. And I went through this. Actually, the idea of this video was sparked by a conversation that I had in one of my comments on one of my videos on YouTube. Somebody said, you can't compare them. They're not even remotely close as different products and services. I'm not comparing the products and services. And from now on, if anybody says anything to me about this, I'm just going to send them this video, and feel free to send them this video if you run across it in your own life. But it's the growth curve. Every single company, every single asset on the planet goes through some sort of adoption, goes through some sort of curve, right, in terms of growth. So that's what we're going to be comparing. And every single company has it. So it makes sense to compare the growth curve. I'll discuss that, all of my thoughts and opinions on this, and I'm going to refer to Grok AI as well, because I mentioned in one of my comments on in the replies that I believe that we were somewhere around 10 to 15% into the adoption of MJ, and then I mentioned that somewhere around 2015 was when we saw critical mass in the internet boom and the tech stocks. So we'll see what AI has to say. Spoiler alert, it's pretty much bang on with what I said. Before we get to it, make sure to smash the like. If you're new, you can subscribe, tick the bell, all that good stuff. You'll be notified on any future videos or when I go live. And as always, this is not financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. You can follow us over on X as well, formerly Twitter. Handle for that is @GroupPow. Going to be using that as my platform of choice going forward. So before I give you the research here and my thoughts and opinions, and then what Grok thinks, what do you think? Where do you think, in 2001 when Amazon dropped 95%, where do you think it was in terms of its growth potential and its growth curve? Do you think we were at mass adoption? Do you think we were at the early adopters phase? Look at the growth curve and do a little bit of research there. But pause the video, let me know what you think, and we'll see if you're correct. I was pretty much bang on. And then do the same exercise for MJ. Where do you think we are in terms of MJ's growth curve, right? And I kind of fed this kind of some input here that I wanted to get that exact answer. So I put my first question to Grok AI was, in 2001, how much would you say internet stocks and tech companies were along into their growth curve percentage-wise? And you can pause the video if you want to read everything, but I highlighted all the key areas here. So Amazon and eBay were still early in their long-term growth potential, probably around 10 to 20%, and this is in 2001, after the stock dropped 95%. The only reason why Amazon was able to drop 95% is because it was so early in that growth curve, right? You'd never see Amazon drop 95% now after a big boom and bust and a bull market into a bear market. That the whole world would have to pretty much end at that point, right? Because the market gap gets so large, it just wouldn't happen. So you want that volatility, because with those 95% corrections becomes generational wealth. Look what happened after 2001, after that 95% crash. And, Amazon, Apple, Tesla, all of them almost went bankrupt, right? So again, what did they eventually achieve by today's standard? It goes based, that's of what they eventually achieved by today's standards. Given the internet's penetration and tech adoption, we're still in the nascent stages globally. Only about 8% of the world was online in 2001. So I said somewhere around 10 to 20% as well in 2001 for these tech companies. And I compared that to kind of the MJ industry right now. Now we'll see what it has to say in just a moment. But yeah, only 8% of the world was online in 2001. So you could even say it was maybe even a little bit less than that, right? And then pure internet stocks, though, closer to 10 to 15% of their ultimate potential. So again, that's pretty much bang on with what I was saying in the comment section when I was discussing this with somebody on YouTube. And then I said, what year would you say internet stocks and tech companies reached their critical mass and full growth potential? If we define critical mass as when the internet and tech sector became a dominant, unshakable force in the global economy, I'd lean toward 2015 to 2020 as the sweet spot. And that's what I said, right? Usually about 10 to 20 years, a decade or two. Same thing's going to be for MJ. I think, it's going to be another probably decade or two before we hit critical mass. And you can say it's very similar in terms of their growth curve. You can maybe make the argument that now with the internet, with technology evolving the way it is, some companies grow faster, and I would agree with that. But MJ being MJ, there's not really a whole lot of technology involved. Eventually, there'll be more automation and AI. But I think for the most part, it's usually around a decade or two, right? And Amazon dropped 95% when it was about 10 to 20% into its growth curve. And all MJ is dropping, 80, 90 plus percent. And I still think it's about 10 to 20% into its growth curve. So I said, now compare the growth curve of the MJ industry. How far would you say MJ is into its growth curve? And if we scroll down, I'd peg it at 40 to 50% though, through its curve. Further along than internet stocks in 2001, around 20 to 30%, but with a slower, choppier trajectory due to regulation. You have to remember that as well. They weren't, Amazon dropped 95%. They weren't selling illegal drugs in the US. So that's even more growth ahead, right? Its critical mass, 80 to 90% might hit in 2030, 2040. So that's exactly what I'm saying. Another decade or two, that's pretty much bang on, right? Another decade or two, we should see MJ at its full potential. But I didn't agree with this 40, 50%. I challenged Grok here. I called Grok out. And yeah, I called it out. And let me scroll down here. You're spot on. I said Singapore still offers the death penalty. And it says conclusion. This is after the revised answer. You're spot on. Singapore's death penalty throws a wrench into any rosy global estimate. MJ is likely to be 15 to 25% into its growth curve as of 2025, not 40 to 50%. It's past the early adopter phase, like the internet stocks in 1995 and 2000. So we're pretty much right around the same, in my opinion. Like I've said on the YouTube, I've said this many times on my channel. I mentioned it many times in the YouTube comments. And I went and I asked Grok, and I wasn't really trying to sway it any type of way. You can just see that this is mostly just what it came out with. I did sway it when it said 40, 50%. I was like, okay, what are you smoking here? You're not smoking MJ, you're smoking something else that belongs on Schedule 1, right? But yeah, after I say Singapore's still offers the death penalty, even I think it was Seth Rogen came out and said that he loves smoking everywhere except for Singapore. They'll effing kill you there, right? So yeah, just for simple possession, that tells me that, yeah, we're probably close to 10 to 15%. I wouldn't say 15 to 25. I'd say, probably 15% is a sweet spot. But again, that's very similar to what the internet was in 2000 and 2001 after it dropped 95%. A lot of MJ names have dropped 95%. So you have to think it's probably going to be another decade or two, like I said, somewhere around 2030, 2040. And we have the most growth. We have 90% of the growth ahead of us. Again, it's still federally illegal in the US. What does that tell you? That tells you that there's so much growth, it's not even funny. You still get the death penalty for simple possession in certain parts of the world, in Singapore, right? What does that tell you? There's at least 90% of the growth ahead. And you can't have the volatility, you can't have the life-changing wealth without those 80 to 90% pullbacks. Case in point, just look at Amazon, look at any tech company, look at any new, emerging market and nascent industry startup, and these companies that go on to change the world. They all look the same usually in the first 10 years or so, right? And there's always those 80 to 90+% pullbacks. You see it all the time in crypto. And again, crypto doesn't have the decades and centuries of stigma and propaganda that we do with MJ. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on this. Like I said, this is going to be my last video. And yeah, I get pretty frustrated sometimes when people say I can't compare this. The products and services aren't the same. Who said I was comparing products and services? Obviously, they're nowhere near similar. Right? It's the growth curve. So hopefully this makes sense. If it does, make sure to smash like if you think I earned it today. Leave your comment in the comment section. We'll continue the conversation there. I always love hearing from you. It's Rod with Power Group. Thanks again for joining us on the Pursuit of Wealth, and we'll catch you on the next one.